this was on an impromptu. There's reasons why I don't do it routinely. Part of it is getting everything set up and ready, but the other part of it is every classroom, you gotta train the computer. And it's easier to train one computer that I haul around than it is to train every classroom. So what ended up happening with the recording is it went to download it, and for some reason on this computer, even though I exist and I'm logged on to it, it had absolutely no access to any drive that I could write to. It didn't have my OneDrive on it, or actually it had it, but it wasn't allowing anything to be saved to it. So when you can't save to anything, it just goes. They even tried to recover it from like the hidden files and stuff, and no luck. So anyway, I really don't want to record from here. And today's improvisation is I had to log us in because I just unplugged the monitor so I could plug this into the power strip. So at the end of our class, I'll have to plug that back into the next class. Anyway, ask your name. Okay, I think we got most of the gang here. We filled in enough. Oh, one thing that isn't included is my PowerPoint.
Gracias, mío.
Bueno.
I don't know why the PowerPoint is. And I'm in the wrong chapter. Sorry, it's my other class.
Might be computer.
Ahead of ourselves. There we go.
Yeah, it's because it's gaming. Okay. Yeah. It was like.
Okay, let's make that bigger. And I had us left off at, let's look at exercise 4, which would have been okay, we talked about opportunity cost last class, if my memory is right. And believe me, that always doesn't feel like it's right these days at times. So correct me if you think otherwise. What I think, according to my notes, is I said, go take a look at exercise 4 as a practice question. And that would have been talking about, as I flip to it, no, that's not right. Group N, show exercise 4. I don't think we talked about constrained resources. That doesn't sound familiar. That's the other. M and N are too close to
Yes.
the same letter, and my handwriting's bad. My mother said I should have been a medical doctor.
Yeah.
There's a reason I work with computers. I can type it and I can read my own handwriting. I must have wrote down what the other group was doing. Anyway, I didn't think we were there. That was, because my head was, I'm teaching that today. So no, you don't know this yet. Let me back up a second.
It's a budget.
We
You have
did,
chapter 9.
Sorry, what?
Chapter 9.
yeah, I know it's chapter,
It's
yeah.
chapter 7.
Yes, yes, thank you. I thought I changed that. my computer business information systems class that uses the same book, they are in chapter 7. And chapter 7 is the next chapter you do. So I was in it with them and didn't change it to you. So that's why this is also looking at. One moment. We will get there. I've already bugged the publisher. Saying they gotta have a way to bookmark this stuff a lot better. They said maybe the next edition. Okay, we did talk about
Opportunity cost.
yeah, we talked about make buy, opportunity cost. We have not got into special order yet, right?
Yeah.
Or did we?
No,
No, we're not.
No.
I didn't think we had.
only opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost.
Yes. So our head was good with opportunity cost, I think. There is, if I get to the exercises, because this is just the content part of it. Now let's look at exercises. Exercise 4 will be, scroll, whether to make a buy. We covered excellent, we did cover this.
You bring the
Brief exercise, right?
Okay, I know we did 3.
No, we're not covered. Brief exercise 9.4.
Sorry?
Brief exercise 9.4.
You can find it.
Yeah. Now, I'm just checking this one here for there's something else I wanted to put into discussion.
You bring the chapters.
And I just wanted to see.
But secrets.
Okay, so I got that one. Let's go back to brief exercise. We did the drop the city. And we were looking at four. Talk about the starters, that part's good. Okay.
Which page?
We should have done this one. We haven't done it.
No.
So you have done that.
Yeah, it says 9.4. We have to done. This is we already done. We did this.
Yeah, that's what my memory's doing. I remember talking about it twice, so I've covered both. And I'm getting my
We have to
handwriting.
concentrate on exercise 9.4.
Yeah, so now it's the exercise on it. Good. All right, I'm in agreement. That's aligning now once I adjust from my chicken scratch notes. Okay. This was good till they changed the days of the double periods. All right. All right, exercise 94. Finally. Penn Products manufactures 55,000 units of Part S6 every year on their assembly line. At that level of activity, here's the behavior of their cost to make a unit. We've got direct materials, direct labor, and variable overhead, which vary by the number of units. And we have fixed overhead of $16.65 for a total cost per part of $46.25. An outside supplier shows up and says, how many units do you think you're going to make right now? And somebody came up and said, 48,000. It's not really quite what the question says, but that's probably how the conversation should have been in the question. So the supplier said, I can sell you 48,000 parts for $38.85 a part. Okay? So, of course, your people in the company are saying, yes, let's buy the cheaper part. Makes sense. So, if they were going to take the offer, here's the part that gets into opportunity here. They could take the area of the factory where they're making the part and rent it out to someone else. So we got two things happening here. Here's a part, we can buy it for less cost. Further, we can take the space that we were using to make the part, rent it out, and get some extra cash. Hence the opportunity. So the question comes in here, should we do this? And before we get into our analysis, there's a however, 30% of their overhead that's in here will be avoided if we buy from the outside supplier, which means the other 70% will not. So 70% of the cost here, we aren't going to save. 3 guesses what the requirement is. Figure out whether or not we should do this. Don't read this one for the moment. Okay, so let's get the first part. Should we do the deal? So without doing any calculations, anybody got a first guess? How many of you think we should buy the part and rent out the factory space? How many of you think we should not? Not taking score here, it's just gut impressions. You guys are going, why are you even asking the question? Because now we got to go and analyze it and find out what the real answer is.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so there's a big trick in this question. A huge one, not even a little one, it's big. And as I show you the solution, I want to see if you picked up on it. The other group didn't, by the way. And then I led them to it, and then you saw that, happen. So don't worry, but there's a huge trick. You've already got an advantage because I didn't tell them that. So it hit them without realizing it at the time. So, having said all that, let's go take a look at the answer. Well, with that, just making darn sure I opened up the right book. And I did, except I'm in the wrong section of it. Exercise 9.4. So how do you think we should start this answer?
We have to calculate the percentage that is saving versus that you don't save, no, in the fixed overhead.
Sure.
We have to calculate that.
Yep. So a couple of things here in presentation, just before we get into the numbers. You kind of have two ways you can do these questions. You are either doing them kind of in total dollar, or you're doing them per unit. They did this one both ways. And generally speaking, I don't care which way you do it on a test. The doing it total dollars takes sometimes a bit more work, but will almost always give you the right answer if you do it right. When you deal with per unit, you are more likely to make a mistake. And remember, in a test situation, you're under pressure, which means you are more likely to make a mistake. Okay, so, but this is an example of showing it kind of a bit both ways. So here's the first way to look at this. We have the direct materials from the original question of $6.66 per unit. We have $18.50 for the direct labor and $4.44 for the variable overhead. I'm going to do this. We'll see how well it doesn't work in a moment. Because the screen isn't always wide enough for a lot of things to do it properly, and then it jumps around to different questions. And then I have to scroll back. But anyway, just so you saw where those numbers are coming from, this is the original question in the book,
Yeah.
and here's where they're beginning to appear on
Yeah.
the answer. Okay, I'll make it fill the screen again in a moment. These are the easy three in doing all this stuff. 3 marks, because this is the easy part, so don't screw them up. Okay, just put them in and do the math. Note for a moment, fixed overhead here, 1665.
It's 30%.
Is that,
What the heck happened?
is that 30%?
It's 30%.
Yeah, but there's more to the story, okay? As I said, there's a really big trick about to
Yeah.
happen here. So, anyway, let's go take a look at the thing, not that thing, other thing. Answer. There we go. Okay, so we are extending these three by the 48,000 units we're going to make. And then I'll get to the overhead. So those parts are easy. So what the heck happened here? Correctly identifying that we're tracking the cost we have to pay. In other words, the part we can't save here. So essentially in all of this here, if we are making this product, if there's 70% of the cost we can't save, for example, then I'm taking it out of the calculation because I'm going to have the cost either way. The whole point here is to catch the costs that I can't save in the making. So 30%, right?
But 30% comes 4.99.
Sorry, this thing just jumped to the wrong slide again. I hate it when it does that. Get us back to our question.
Yeah, it's not the number. No, it's 4.99.
Five. 3, and then 4. Finally, we're back. Here's the calculation of where they got the 578 from.
Okay.
Okay. We had 1665 back in the book,
Yeah.
Yes.
and this is the big trick that kicked in. Just thought of something else.
And what?
After talking about losing the recording, I forgot to turn it on.
Oh.
It's okay, but picking up where we left off here, recording is now on. Anyway, 1665 was being done at a rate of 55,500 units. So before you start doing 30% or 70% of anything, you have to figure out what the total cost of that fixed overhead was. Because it was never $16.65 per unit. What it was some big number that just happened to be conveniently divided amongst 55,500 units to come up with $16.65. In other words, said in English, it cost us a lot of money for our factory. I'm not paying a rate of $16.65 per unit, I'm paying a lot of money for the factory. And what that was $924,075. I'm paying that every month here, or every year, whatever time period it is. So what they did in the question, in the book, is they had this big number, they divided it by 55,500 units, and came up with a rate of 1665. That's where 1665 came from in the question. So as I'm seeing faces trying to get your head around this, let me just flip back for a moment to the question.
Yeah.
In the first line, they snuck that in. How many of you never read the first line of a question? It's usually some fluff that doesn't matter. This time it mattered. So they got us thinking about 48,000 in the question, And so all of you would have taken 1665, multiplied by whatever, and gone and done the work. But the catch is it never was this amount. It was $924,075, and when they were describing it on the cost per unit, they took that big number, divided it by this, and came up with that.
Yeah, so we can do also 55,000 divided in the 1665 to have per unit,
Yeah.
and then multiply to 48,000, no?
No.
It will be that, you can do
You're,
it.
yeah, you're getting on the right track here with this thing. I'm gonna show you the rest of it in a second here,
Okay.
okay? So the trick here is realizing that all fixed costs are a really big number. Okay, and sometimes they give you that number, which is fine, but if they don't, and they're giving you a cost per unit, like they did here, you have to figure out what the really big number was.
So to put it in other words, that for fixed overhead, we cannot use the per unit cost, right? We have to consider the total cost. Because I wonder here is why we can't use the 16.65 divided by 3, and then we use that number to multiply it by 48,000. Why we need to use the total cost?
It might work if you do your math right, because there's
Yes,
rules
but
of mathematics here.
The number will be different, totally different.
Yes, hold that thought. And what I'm getting at is there's only one really big number, 924,000. That's what the fixed cost cost. All they were trying to do is convert it into a per unit here in the question and trick you in the process, because they like tricking students in questions.
Yeah.
We instructors like doing that too.
Yeah, because if we use that like 16.65 divided by 3, then will be like 5.55 per 5, and then if you
You're
this will be
getting to the
lower,
right answer.
Yeah.
So just hang tight for about 2 seconds. All I'm just saying is if you are given a question, like on a test where they're quoting any type of fixed cost as a per unit, stop, don't do anything else until you find out what the real total fixed cost was.
Yeah.
And that means you're looking for something here that says what level was this calculated at. And it was calculated at if they were doing 55,000 units. So you're going to take that number, multiply it by this number, and come up with this total cost.
Mhm.
That's what the total fixed cost is. And if you don't have that part right, you won't get the question right. So, to the rest of the answer, only 30% is avoidable. So now you get to do the 30% part. So you are going to end up with $277,023. That being 30% of $924,075. Okay? So that's the amount we want here. The big number as far as this discussion, the question is concerned. And now we get to in case that's just been screwing up your head enough, if I'm trying to figure it out per unit, and I'm making 48,000 units, I'm dividing that by 48,000, and then I get $5.78 per unit if I am working with 48,000 units. There's a really good mind trick. So fixed costs are always a big number being spread over all the units. The fixed number, the big number stays the same. So what changes is the amount going per unit depending how many units you're using. And then this has the other wrinkle that we're only concerned with 30%.
So the fixed overhead per unit is actually a variable.
Mm-hmm. Oops. That was
Yeah.
close shave. Yes, that's going to trip me up, I know this.
Is that related?
This would be a real good exam question.
Is that related to some concept called the relevant range?
Try that again, sir.
Is that like related to any concept called the relevant range?
Yes. Very true. That's actually the technical term. relevant range of production activity. You can only use a fixed cost in per units there and keep it the same if you're doing your production at roughly the same levels of activity. So if we were making stuff on or around 55,000, like maybe one month it's 54,000, 53, 56, something like that, they could have relied on the 1665 as being close enough. But if you have wild swings in your production, you can't do that. We go into that a lot in managerial accounting with the accounting majors. You've got to know what level of activity you're operating at in your factory if you want this to be accurate. This one really proved the point. So what ends up happening, back to the question, is at 48,000 units of production, this is what the total cost will be to make the part, as opposed to this cost to buy it. And on a per unit basis, it would look like this. This would be a really good exam question. Big smile. Evil smile. Maniacal grin. And I want to live and not have all of you try to attack me at home and whatever here if I actually gave you a question like that. So you probably won't get something this tricky. But what I do want to impress upon you is if you can get your head around the business logic here, like don't just memorize your calculation, get your head around what it's meaning, you would be able to handle anything we could throw at you for this type of a question. Okay? So this is a good one to start in your part of your study process. Understand that this was the real total cost.
In spite of getting a total cost calculation, can we go for the per cost calculation?
Sorry?
Any chances to go per unit calculation?
Going
Getting
further?
Let's go over here. In spite of
Oye, con
calculating the
Andrew.
total amount, can we
Ya,
go
creo que
for
la
the
fecha
per
del
cost per
3.
unit?
You probably could. I'm not sure if they got any other questions that are too similar.
Because you said
But-
that I can do any method, right?
Yeah.
Per unit also, calculation like amount also.
Yeah.
If I go for per unit, how could I calculate the fixed cost?
Yeah, this is the trick though, like what I'm
I
really
want
trying to
the
make the
calculation.
point, is if you're given per unit information about a fixed cost, you have to figure out what the real cost was in total before you do any analysis. That's really the trick here.
We cannot calculate directly the per
Yes.
unit. You have to calculate the amount first, then only you have to get the per unit value.
Yeah. So if you're given total costs, you would have been handed the 924,000 originally, and you'd be working out what the per units were individually of their various things. But that would have been boring for us testing. These items always stayed this amount because they vary per unit, so they stay the same no matter what level we do. But a fixed cost will change. The more you do, the smaller the dollar value gets. That's also covered in a chapter we skipped over in the book. But I believe chapter 3 or 4, somewhere in there, 5, there's something about cost behaviors. And having said that, part of chapter 8 starts with it too. So you've had a bit of it, but you haven't got all of it. Anyway, so that was the trick to the question. Get your head around that little piece, you're going to be good with anything I could throw at you. You won't get a question that's tricky on your exam. All right, but let's finish this thing anyway. So that's dealt with part 1. Okay? We should still continue to make the part. Because whether I look at it this way or look at it this way, the number's less than the buy. And it's only less because I can't save the other 70. If I could save the other 70%, it might have gone the other way. But if I can't, it's no help. So there's the first part of the normal make buy. Now we got to deal with the rent.
Yeah.
So with the rent, are we going to make money out of this? Just like is the rent saving us cost or getting us extra money or not? the answer is yes, we're getting extra money we didn't have before. So, is that going to change your decision on whether we make or buy? And you might remember a class or so back when I introduced the thing to you, I said just because you have an opportunity doesn't mean you should still do it. You need to do this analysis and say, does the opportunity make sense? So, here's what our baseline is. Now, we are going to get an extra $148,000 if we rent out the space.
Mhm.
So basically, there's two ways you could answer this. Either are correct. What they did in their write-up is they said it was costing us $1,864,800 to buy the product from there. Okay? We will get to save $148,000 on it because we're getting rent in. So we're going to pay $1.8 million out, but I'm going to get $148,000 in. Net effect is it will cost us $1.7 million here to make or to buy the product, which is still more than making it by about $20,000, $18,000, $19,000, depending how you round it. So it's close. So that's one way you could have written it up. The other way you could have written it up is saying, here's what the cost is to make, and because if we do the make, we will not get the $148,000, you could pretend that that's a fake cost. You could say, by making it, we will lose $148,000, and we will add that to the cost of the number on the left. So what you would end up happening is you would say this, you would say 148,000
Yes.
plus, add it up, and you would get about 1,734,000 or whatever it adds up to. It's going to be, the difference is still going to be this. It'll just be added to this number, and it will be just more than what it would be to buy. So it would be against, or just less, I should say. It would still be suggesting it's cheaper to make it. Now, that's on financial terms. Do keep in mind, in the real world here with business, there might be some other factors you might wrestle with. First, if all your employees were saying we're being worked too much or whatever, you might be saying this is making it easier on the employees. If you got really bad labor relations, it might be one of those, I'm trying to discourage the employee to go elsewhere, so I'm cutting their job, and it'll only cost me $18,000 difference to do it. Not good labor management, but it's still one theory that's out there. You might have another opportunity that those employees could work on. You know, or maybe you've been burning them out, and this is giving an opportunity for a period of time to give them some holiday time or something here. I can buy the part instead and minimize a lot of the cost. If you were at $1,800,000 here, or even $1,600,000, is $20,000 a lot of money, or 18 or 19? It's not, you don't want to waste it, but it's getting into the zone where they're close enough, where somebody might say, maybe it is easier to let my employees go off on a holiday, I'm meaning this good, like go spend time with your family, you've been working 48-hour days, and all that kind of stuff. We will buy the part for now, I can cover some of the extra cost by renting, and as a company, we'll absorb this cost because you matter to us and we want you to have some time off. I have seen that happen. So I'm just saying there could be other factors that you would take into account here. Maybe the person we're renting the factory to, we want to build some strategic ties. We see ourselves doing business together, but they can't find factory space. well, we're taking an 18,000 hit here to give them space because we want to work with them. Maybe the supplier we want to work with in the future, so we're buying an order from them, because. So there could be other reasons for saying, let's do the buy.
I can't understand.
Sorry?
I can't understand. Just having not clarify this rental
Yeah.
opportunity cost, how you calculate that?
How do I get it?
How you get this 1.69810? This total cost including opportunities cost. How could you keep it?
Okay, starting back up, we've got
Okay.
this value for buying the part. We calculated before. Here's what it costs us to make it.
Yes. That.
So that's
The
the
total
starting
cost.
line. Oops. So that's the starting lines here. Great, now I got a table on my computer. Stop it. Okay, so this was the cost to make, the cost to buy. We're just carrying that down
So
here.
but make is different amount, right? 1,000. It's like 1,098,023, but down it says 1,660, 800.
Yeah.
But the amount is different. How could it be different? The making cost
Yeah.
and then total cost. I'm not written that. It's here. The total cost is like 198.02. Okay, but
Yeah.
while you are making the total cost, it's like 16,800. You written it like this. How could this amount be different? I want the total amount calculation. So make it. You just code it out. This amount.
Where were we getting that one from?
Yeah, you just code it out. I can't get that. So the now stop. It's made.
I still don't know where you're getting it from.
The total cost as above for make
How could
is.
this
Oh,
amount be
sorry, I
calculated?
see where you're getting it from.
Because this amount is total cost which I have been getting down.
Okay.
This is
there's a-
rental, and
Yeah.
what about this amount?
Yeah, I see where you're getting at now. And I missed that. This is what you run into when it's behind you. Sorry. Good question. I believe that is what we call a textbook error. That it should have been that number
The same
copied
number.
down.
That's
My
why
apology.
Confusing. Sorry.
Okay, the one thing with the hearing stuff, I'm just gonna point this out. Fewer words are always the best, because your mind's trying to process what it thinks it's hearing. So, what you did when you actually said here and pointed, all of a sudden is, oh. I should have noticed it myself in the jumping around. This is called I'm expecting something, so I assumed they did it right, and I just didn't notice it myself as I was scrolling up. I was seeing this, and I said, see, there it is down there, but no, it wasn't. This 1698023 that you're seeing there, that's what should have been up here. Now, how did this happen?
Yeah, that's.
I'll tell you how it did. In a prior edition of the textbook, they had a similar question where that probably was the number calculated in it, and when they updated the textbook, somebody missed changing it. That's probably how it really happened. But good question, and my apology for not noticing it earlier. It should have been this number there.
But this book has many errors. Yeah.
So.
I want a refund.
So here's a whole bunch of you that were all writing copious answers about how that number came up in theories and this, that, and the other thing, and it was really, oops, just a mistake. Anyway, now the question makes sense?
Yes.
Good, we're doing good. So anyway, this is the case of showing that the opportunity is maybe still not good enough, But I do want to point out there could be other business reasons of why you would take the $18,777 hit. You know, so that becomes a business decision. But from a financial perspective, you would not buy the part, you would still continue to make it. Okay? Good question, make sure you study it. And I'm just hedging something off at the pass now. 698 0 2 3 0 2 3. Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna save it now, so next time we don't have, I'm doing this answer, I don't have the problem. Okay? All right. Now that we've covered the hardest type of a question you could possibly have had, I'll tell you, right, the midterm's not gonna happen.
Excuse me, sir, can you explain why we are subtracting the rental? Because it is income for the company. So when we buying product from outside, we are giving that space to the some other country for the rent.
Yeah.
So it's the income to our company. Why we are separating here?
Because what they're saying is, it's gonna cost me this amount to buy the part,
Yeah.
and I'm offsetting it by this extra revenue. So you ask a good question. What they're doing is they're expressing this from a cost
Yeah.
angle, which means revenues are negative. There is nothing wrong with saying I would have had a bracket, $1,864,800 cost, plus $148,000 revenue. My net cost would have been bracket 1,7. You know, that would have been acceptable too. Just make sure, don't just throw a number down, tell me what the thing is, and I can tell if you're presenting it in a way that makes sense.
It was mentioned in the question, right?
Yeah. They mentioned, but there's several ways you can.
If they are not mentioned, it's just, they give that it's a
Commercial
rental
insurance.
value for, if you are buying the product, it was a rental.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like that, if you, nothing additional information is there, then I will add
75.
that amount.
yes, yeah, so that's the idea here, is like, I'm getting an
I was
offset.
expecting like
Yeah.
90.
So it's not really gonna cost me 1.8,
was
it's gonna
expecting
cost this
90.
because I made an extra 148. Okay? All right. Several ways you can sort of say the same things or so. All right, so, moving on to the next type of decision. This was dealing one with, do I make or buy? Probably one of the harder types that you could run into. This would probably be about the hardest it could be. Slide deck. All right, so in our slide decks, we've covered opportunity cost. We are now going to go to a very common one, the special order. This is probably one of the ones you can see the most in making decisions. So we have a company here that is making a product, costs $20. I shouldn't say cost, the selling price is $20. That's what our customers pay for the product. A foreign distributor comes up to us, not somebody we deal with routinely, and they say, I want to buy 3,000 units of your product, but I only have a budget of $10 that I can pay, half of our normal price. Would you sell it to me? Now, before we wrestle some of this, it says it's a one-time order. So this is something that's, the dealer is not trying to negotiate a routine price. It's a one-time special case. And giving this deal will not affect our regular sales stuff. It's not like we're already selling these units to a customer and they suddenly get a deal and we lose out. This is entirely going to have no effect on our regular business. Does that seem far-fetched? It might sound far-fetched, but no, it isn't. The other class did ask, that question. Actually, I offered it before they could ask it, but they were wondering. And I basically had said to them, an example of this is, what if there's a fundraiser happening for a charity? And the charity says, you make really good travel mugs. Could you give us a special order of your travel mug for our Special Olympic or our special event or something here? The most I can pay is $10. So you see, when I describe it like that, that's not, like really that profound of a thing. Or maybe Doctors Without Borders is calling you up and saying, could we buy some special thing that we're doing for a medical thing somewhere else? It's not going to be a routine, cost. So they give you a special order. And we're really trying to say, should we accept the order? So what do you guys think first off about doing an order at half the price that you would normally charge for it? So the first thing is well, that really depends what our cost is, right? But you're losing half your revenue here. Should we do it? Well, we will see. So, number one, first thing, before you get into any cost analysis, you need to ask yourself a burning question here. Are we able to do the order first? We haven't decided should we do it. The first question is can we do it? And that goes to plant capacity. So what happens in here is I need to know how many total units we can make in our factory. And they tell us that here. We can make 10,000 units here. We are currently making 5,000. We're operating at half capacity. Do I have enough capacity to do this special order? Yes. 3,000 plus 5 is 8. It's less than 10. We can do it. So this gets skipped over in some of the exercises. Before you do any financial analysis, the real question is do we have capacity to do it? Factory, labor, the whole bit, because if you don't, that changes your analysis. In fact, it might even just make it an automatic no, we can't do the order, depending on where the constraint is. But that's the first thing to check. Can I do it? Yes or no? Now we can look at, should we do it? Sometimes the touch screen works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay. So, doodling some stuff on the page. Here's what the current financial statement looks like. Give me a moment. I'm just going to make that a little bigger so you can see it. So they're making 5,000 units right now at $20, $100,000 profit. 5,000 units of activity is coming up with all these variable costs. They're making $12,000 at the end of the day. Life is good. Do you need to do this financial statement? No. Do you care about most bits of information on this statement? No. The only reason this financial statement is here, and I want you to think about this, we've got our factory bought and paid for. We're operating in the black at 5,000 units of activity. So all the cost of running the factory, the rent, the insurance, the property tax, whatever, we are paying for it. We are making money without this order. All the big overhead costs are covered that are fixed. So if somebody came up to you and said, could you sell me 3,000 units? The first thing that should be in your head is, well, what would it actually cost me to make 3,000 units? And before I get to calculating, you're thinking, well, if it's desks, I need wood, I need somebody to assemble it, those kinds of things. That's the real cost that it's going to take me to make 3,000 units. The factory's paid for it. So the only reason this information was provided is so you can say, where's all the variable costs? Oh, it's $40,000 of variable costs. Well, what's that per unit? 40,000 divided by 5,000 is $8 per unit. So that's what it's gonna cost me to make each one of these extra 3,000 units, because I've already covered the overhead. I just have to pay the fresh ingredients that go into this. Cut to the next slide. Oh, before I do that, somebody is probably going to pick up on something. This is good, by the way. I'm smiling. If this is a special order coming our way, do I really incur any marketing costs here?
No.
Probably not. So the interesting thing is we could actually have a very good debate that we're not going to have, because I want to finish this off and then let you have a bit of a break for a few minutes. But is it really $8 per unit? Because maybe we really aren't expending this. If you were wondering that, good for you. But if we're going to do a quick calculation here, let's just use that number for now. But the critical thinking would be, are we really going to have $5,000 per unit of cost here when the person's coming to us and with the order? I'm not even marketing, they're calling me, if you follow.
So is the marketing for, is this the marketing for the consumer? It's not the marketing for us to attract the end consumers.
Yeah, like when they say marketing costs that are variable here, this is usually like sales commissions or something like that. Like a salesperson goes out to line up an order, so they get paid per unit, like sold. And all I'm saying with this special order is they didn't have to do anything. The person called us. So one could argue we don't have any cost here. Now, we don't know. The question didn't clarify. But it's a critical thinking point. Did we really have this extra cost? So let's get to the answer, and then I'll let you have a break after it. We will make $6,000 doing this special order. How did we come up with that? Well, 3,000 units at $10 for 30,000 of revenue. Let's use the $8 cost for the moment. At 3,000, that's $6,000 increase in revenue. Now that may not sound like a lot, but remember the net income was $12,000 on the prior slide. Just by doing this special order at half price, we just had a 50% increase in net income. Not bad. So you don't want to be necessarily encouraging this on a regular basis. I'm just saying this was a good special order to do. Big impact on the company. And the only reason this works is we've already paid for the factory. You don't want to have your salespeople running around trying to do a ton of these things, because that's gradually going to change your capacities. But if this was a one-time thing, yes, this is a good thing to do. Okay? Very common. Now, I don't think there was anything else that I needed to mention on that before I let you have your break. Nope, I don't. So, after that, we'll take a look at a brief exercise here, run through it, see how it works. And then we're probably going to finish the day off with dealing with what could be the hardest decision for you to have to go through. Except, interestingly enough, I'm finding most accounting for management 605 students usually catch on to the trick of the hardest one very quickly, and you're saying that wasn't all that hard at all. But you don't know what I'm talking about yet. But anyway, we'll have about 10-minute break here, stretch, bathroom, smoke, whatever you need, and then we'll look at the exercise fast, and I will give you the run through the hardest decision you'll have to do.
Yo le pregunté por qué le dice, no te preguntes. No decía que tú le preguntas.